one of them very well. So that's super important. And then there's momentum. It's another piece that's really important to get moving so that you can be ready to raise, right? And the definition is quantity of motion of a moving body measured as a product of its mass and velocity, right? So what does that kind of mean in real English? It means, does it have substance? Your business, is there a thing there? Is it real? And is it moving in a forward direction, right? So some examples of substance: traction, early adoption, partnerships that are valuable to both parties, not just one-sided, a functional product with actual paying customers. This is a really important one to me personally. You know, the concept of an MVP is great. I love it. What I don't love is that many people think an MVP is not something that people should pay for. And the problem with that is, what do you learn from that MVP? You learn that people are willing to use your product for free, which is, you're a business, right? You've got to generate money. So I'm much more excited about a minimum sellable product, but that's a sidebar for a completely different conversation. A team that is off the charts with experience or background or knowledge in whatever it is that you're doing. A great technology that works, a compelling solution to a troublesome problem. So what are some examples of motion, the momentum, the motion part of momentum? Well, consistent or rapid growth in multiple meaningful metrics, trusted people, other investors, media, organizations that are out there saying great things about you, consistently hitting difficult to achieve milestones. Again, going back to those updates where you're constantly hitting your milestones and doing the things that you say you're going to do. Graduation from a top tier accelerator is an example of an item. A great go-to-market strategy that you've actually tested and it works, and a repeatable formula for success. I'm going to show an example of this later, but if you can show an investor that, hey, we've got this fire burning, all we need is a little bit more fuel to pour on that fire and it's going to explode. If you can do that formula, that's a huge storytelling advantage, right? That's a huge win for you as you're out there speaking with investors. Okay, so we talked about like kind of getting ready and some of the things that are important. And by the way, these are like, this is a fraction of the checklists that are in an investor's mind, right? Everybody's got their own set of checklists and things that they want to see from a company that they choose to invest in. The more of these things you can check off, the better. The fewer reasons they have to say no, and the more reasons they have to get excited about what you're doing. So again, it takes more than just being ready, right? There's an entire process and planning and execution and all that side of it that goes with it. So first off, be organized, run a process, right? There's a lot to this, and you're going to repeat it a bunch of times, right? You're going to get some of that momentum. You're going to line up your tools, which we'll talk about in a minute. You're going to build that story, which is really important because it's got to be a compelling story that stands out. You're going to identify prospects that you're going to target, right? And they need to be the right ones. Don't just spray and pray to investors. Research the investors. Find investors that actually understand your industry and they care about what you're doing. It makes all the world of a difference if you're talking to somebody that gets it, that understands what you're doing. Work your network with warm introductions in order to get the meetings, right? So you can meet with investors or even connectors. Build that excitement, show progress and execution, keep them on the hook and close. And most importantly, this doesn't have to be a miserable experience, right? You can have fun, you can be yourself, and above and beyond everything else during this process, be genuine. People can sniff out if you're fake or you're not being yourself. So it's vitally important to be you because, again, at an early stage, investors are investing in you. They need to get to know you and who you are as a person. It's super important. All right, let's talk a little about tools. First of all, you probably want some kind of a lightweight CRM, right? I've used Streak in the past. It's built right into Gmail, so I never have to leave my inbox. It's kind of nice. HubSpot, a lot of folks have good things to say about that. You can also use spreadsheets, Airtable, other things, as long as you're diligent, right? You need to be able to take notes because you're going to be meeting with 100 people, maybe more. You're going to get a lot of introductions and a lot of conversations going, you can't possibly remember it all. You also can't remember whether they're interested or how interested they are, or what the next steps are, or when you're supposed to reach out to them again, right? And so use the tools to track that information for you so that you can be really efficient at your job. Dropbox or some other file repository, because you're likely going to have a data room of some kind. Later stage, the more data that's going to be in that room, but investors are going to say, hey, send me your data room, and it'll have your deck and some financial models and whatever other different things you want to plug into that. Get social, right? If there are people that you don't know, start getting to know them. Use LinkedIn, AngelList, Twitter. Engage with what they're doing and what they're talking about. Add value to the conversation so that when you reach out at some point down the road, they're going to recognize you. They're going to say, oh yeah, I remember we had this thread about whatever it was, and that was great. Sorry, phone's ringing. Email, use it well. We're going to talk a little bit about this, but that update that you send out, it's really important that you communicate efficiently, not just with the people when you're sending decks ahead of time, time it, a day or two before your meeting so that they get the deck. They have a little bit of time to review it, but not too early so that they forget it by the time that you meet. And update them frequently, get them on your list. PowerPoint, Google Slides, of course, the obvious things, but you also have friends and fellow founders and a network. This is probably one of the biggest tools in your tool chest, and you have to learn how to use that properly. You also have to kind of get into the right mindset. And this is something that this book completely changed how I think about fundraising and just pitching in general. And so I will say that Oren, the author, is a little bit over the top when he talks about how he approaches these investor meetings. So I want to make sure I call that out. Like, I don't think in the real world, a lot of what he recommends is completely relevant, but the point he's making is what's important. And that point is you are the prize, right? What you're bringing to the table is the value. Money is kind of a commodity, which you can get from many, many different places in these days. So be bold, take charge, have confidence, and sell your story. And the book was definitely changing for me. I got to know Oren, and this is a decade ago, probably when we first met. But it definitely changed how I felt about the conversations that I was having and the people that I was meeting with. I became more of an equal to them as opposed to somebody who's begging and pleading for money. So that mindset is very important. Okay, so this is where I want you guys to unmute yourselves for like 5 or 10 seconds. And I want you to answer this question. Just start blurting them out. Let me hear them. What's the purpose of the deck? Anybody? Come on.
Tell the story.
To communicate your vision.
Educate excitement.
Know you. Get to know you.
Visualize what you're saying.
Communicate.
Facilitate a discussion.
Elaborate the vision.
Show your product.
Okay. These are all great, but they're all, I have not heard the right answer yet.
Introduce yourself.
Nope, that's not it either.
Create FOMO.
These are all great. Okay, everybody
Trust.
go back on mute, everybody. The right answer is to get the meeting. That's it. Your goal with this deck is to get the meeting. Because when you're talking to them in person, that's when you're going to sell them. That's when they're going to get excited. They're going to get interest in what you're doing because your deck is amazing and it teases them. And this tease is very important. Stop trying to put your entire brain into a deck. Nobody wants to read that. It's a mess. It's hard to consume. Nobody has time for that. Understand that these investors, they see hundreds of decks, sometimes weekly. They have to filter through them. And you have to catch their attention with something unique and simple, right? So come on, don't give them something that's going to put them to sleep at night, right? Stand out, tell your story and be brief. Tease them, show them, don't tell them. I'm going to get into this in a minute. This is something that David Cohen told me from Techstars. He was the founder of Techstars. And it completely changed how I built my decks. And it's hard to do, but it's amazing once you do it right. Hit them in the heart, not the head. Dig into your research, kind of the alligator brain concept versus the analytical brain. The alligator is reactionary and emotional, right? You want to hit people with emotion, something they can relate to, and make an emotional decision and get excited about you, versus that analytical side of, okay, I'm going to think of 7 reasons why I should say no to this person. Lead with your strengths, right? Everybody's got strengths. Remember those check boxes I was kind of talking about earlier, the different things that you want to do? Lead with the ones that you're checking off really strongly. It could be your team. That's amazing. It could be the fact that you have early traction. It could be a number of different things. And keep them on the edge of their seat every single slide, right? So you literally have probably 30 seconds and 2 slides to determine whether or not they're going to read the next slide and reach out to you and say, hey, let's set up a meeting. So get their attention. Give them something that's exciting and different and unique and stands out. Okay, so let's talk about show me, don't tell me. Telling me, this is an example of telling me, right? We help marketers improve their ability to reach potential customers and close more deals. Okay, great, sounds cool. But all it's really done is cause me to have more questions about you. Is this real? Have you started anything? Do you have a product? How about this, where I'm showing you? We onboarded 50 marketers in 30 days. They're paying us $30 a month, and they've increased their close rates by 27%. Okay, holy cow, that sounds amazing. I definitely want to learn more. I definitely want to get into the next slide. Now, how about this for a kicker, right? We spent $1,000 on ads to get those users, and it's generating 1.5 times that every single month, right? So in 35 or so-ish words, you've shown that you've got something, proven that it's just going to take more fuel to build a bigger fire, right? This is that formula for success that I'm talking about. This is something that you've done and proven and tried, and it's working, right? You're doing the work for the investor here by giving them something like this. That's what I mean by show me, don't tell me. Okay, there's probably a few of you who have heard of Guy Kawasaki's 10, 20, 30 PowerPoint rules. Been around for many, 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 many years. What I will say is, please don't use this as a template. Please, please don't, unless you want to put your investors to sleep. But there's a lot of good to it, right? Use it as a guide. What it is 10 slides, and each slide is a topic. Like, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the blah, blah, blah. Don't tell your story that way, right? Use it as a guide. These are the things you need to cover, and definitely use 30-point font, which will force you into telling a more concise story. But again, tell your story, right? If you're around a campfire telling somebody a story, you don't throw bullet points at them. You don't throw one slide with an idea at them in the next slide, right? You tell a story. What you do is then you take those 10 points and you stick them in wherever it makes sense. But tell your story first. It's really, really important. And trust me, you're going to be terrible at this. I was terrible at this when I first started doing it. My first fundraising deck went through 28 iterations in 2 months. I looked it up. I've got all the different copies, and the first one looks nothing like the last one. But that's good, because you iterate, you change, you evolve, and your deck gets better and better, and you get better and better at telling your story. So this is another book that's super important. You're going to see these terms and different things like that. You can Google them, but this is not an exhaustive list of the terms that you need to know. This is the language of VCs. This is the language of your audience. If you can't speak this language, you're going to be at a slight disadvantage. So it's important you know what these things are. This is the book. It's by Brad Feld. They're on like their 4th edition, I think. And the tagline is kind of tells it all, right? It's be smarter than your lawyer and your venture capitalist. So, excuse me, you can Google this stuff, but if you don't know what to Google, you may not find everything. So I use this, and I had all kinds of different sticky notes and stuff throughout to help me understand the language a little better. And I used it as a reference guide. So when you get that meeting, right, you've gone through all this stuff, you're preparing, you're starting to have meetings. 90% of the time, this is nothing more than a conversation. You're probably not going to go through your deck step by step. You're probably not going to be presenting in front of a big room of people. It's going to be a conversation. They may have already seen part of the deck. They may just have questions. They want to ask follow-on questions. And you know your story, right? You know the talking points. Hopefully you've removed 75% of the crap that was in your first deck that was terrible, right? But you kept that information in your brain. You've practiced in front of a mirror, in front of your friends. I used to practice in front of my dog because she would look at me funny. She'd tilt her head, she'd make a noise, she'd run away, she'd scratch herself, whatever. And it would kind of throw me off, but I would just drive through it. And it taught me how to kind of ignore the noise around me and really get good at telling that story. And so you can answer every question. So you're just going to crush the meeting, right? Because you're prepared. You know your story, you know how to tell it. And regardless of how you put your deck together and you've teased them and you've got that meeting, you can answer the questions and tell your story well. Okay, so let's kind of go through this and sort of repeat for clarity. On the prepare side, right? You're going to build your network. You're going to ask for advice. This is kind of an important one, right? When you're meeting with investors, especially the first time, you know, you're not going to ask them for money. Don't do that. There's a saying, and you've probably heard it before. If you ask them for money, you'll get advice. If you ask for advice, you might get money someday. It's relatively true. Ask for advice. Get to know them, right? These are smart people that you're meeting with. They could be previous founders that are angel investors that have a lot of knowledge. Date when you're raising, when you're not raising. Don't do it while you're raising. Try and date beforehand. Build measurable momentum. Kind of put some theories in place, test them, create that formula for success if you can get to that point, keep everyone updated, right? And then execute on the other side. Prepare your tools, research your targets, be hyper organized and run a real process. Read up, be smart, get in that right mindset, tell your story, inject those important items in there. Show me, don't tell me. Practice like crazy, get your story down. You know, I found that when I would prepare for a pitch or a presentation or whatever, I would first write it out and type it out and maybe print it and sort of read from it and get the cadence of telling that story. And what I found is after a few times of doing that, I would begin to change the words so that they flowed better. And they were just, I spoke like, you know, I said them like it was just me talking. And once you get to that point, then it's much easier. It's not about memorization. It's about you telling a story or a specific point. And so it makes that presentation a lot easier. And when they ask those questions, you've already got it. You've talked about it to yourself a bunch of times or to your dog or wherever. Provide those meaningful updates to your investors as things are progressing. Here's who's involved. Here's what we did last week. Here's how the fundraise is progressing, and raise that money and get back to work. Do it quickly. So that's kind of the high level. Would love to open it up to questions. I hope that I teased a high level version of the many things that need to be done here. And I hope I gave you some tactical things that you can use. But again, what I'm hoping we can do now is sort of drill in a little bit on some areas or dive in a little deeper based on what your needs are and what you guys are struggling with or trying to learn and understand as you consider going to raise money.